morning, everyone, and welcome to our home and community-based services discussion today. We are so excited to dive into the topic of how the federal and state governments can and must work together to help people in need get access to vital care infrastructure like home and community-based services. Before we get started, I just wanted to note and make sure that everyone can see that we have ASL interpretation and that you know how to turn on the closed captioning on the Zoom. If you go to the bottom of your Zoom window on the right-hand side, there will be a box with CC inside that says Live Transcript. Click this button and it will give you an option to see subtitles. If you have any additional access needs that are not met during the webinar, please use the chat function to let us know, and we will do our best to accommodate. Okay, let's get to it. A couple of weeks ago, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. And this legislation includes unprecedented investments in clean energy infrastructure, measures to make medication more affordable. However, a crucial component of the president's economic agenda, the care infrastructure agenda, did not make it into this bill, which means that tens of millions of families who need home and community-based services for their aging loved ones or loved ones with disabilities, or those in need of childcare, those in need of paid family and medical leave, we will continue to struggle. Now, no one should have to make impossible choices between caring for our families and working. It's simple. We should not have to make those impossible choices. And investing in our care infrastructure will grow our direct care workforce and allow families who need that support to go to work without worrying about the health and safety of their loved ones. Strengthening and investing in our systems of care protects families from recession, from rising costs of all sorts, and from the stressors of caregiving. And that is why we are here today. We will continue to push for funding for Medicaid home and community-based services as a critical step in fully funding our care infrastructure. And we are so happy to be joined today by some of our biggest champions, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell and State Representatives Padma Kupa and Stephanie Young. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will hear first updates from Congresswoman Dingell and Kupa, and then we will, and Representative Kupa, and then we'll bring in disability, aging, and care advocates for a moderated Q&A to talk about what comes next and how federal and state governments can work together to address this issue. At the end of the program, we'll have time for Q&A before wrapping up at 12:50. And during this time, we'll be using the Q&A feature on the Zoom, and I'll explain how to use that when we get there. Before we dive in with our speakers, I want to thank the groups that helped put today's event together and made sure that all of you knew about it. And thank you again for joining us. Shout out to our co-host organizations, the ARC Michigan, Michigan Developmental Disabilities Institute, Detroit Disability Power, the Area Agencies on Aging Association of Michigan, Mothering Justice, Alzheimer's Association of Michigan, Michigan Elder Justice Initiative, and the National Domestic Workers Alliance. Thank you all so much. And to all the family caregivers and care workers who are watching, who've joined us, we are here to lift you up. With that, I will introduce one of my personal heroes, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who is our fierce champion for home and community-based services in the United States House of Representatives. Thank you for everything you do, Congresswoman Dingell, and welcome.
So, Jen, thank you. And she is one of my personal heroes. I don't think you all know how hard this woman works every single day on this issue. And perhaps one of the greatest things that's come out of working this issue so hard is my friendship with Jen, who just is so devoted to this issue. It's great to be with all of you this morning to discuss something that we wouldn't be on this on the last week of August if it wasn't if it didn't matter to all of us. And I want to say to all of you, this is one of the biggest priorities that I have in the Congress, and it's been for a very long time. I want to thank Caring Across Generations for bringing us together today, and thank all of the panelists for their perspectives and their work, which continues. We are going to keep fighting to address the unmet needs for home and community-based services in Michigan and across the country. We're all here for the same reason today. We need to fix a very broken long-term care system. You know, it was only 2 weeks ago that we did the president signed in Washington, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a different version of Build Back Better, and the reconciliation bill. And there were a lot of good things in it, and I'm going to talk about that for a minute. It was a bitter disappointment to me and to many others who had worked very hard that we did not have home and community-based care in that. So let me first talk about what did happen in there, because there was progress made. We're going to lower prescription drug prices, which will do a lot of good for a lot of Americans. We're making sure that people continue to have access to affordable health care. It ensured that there continued to be subsidies for those that need it to be able to have access to Affordable Care Act and go on the website and be able to purchase insurance. And it got expanded to many other states. Michigan is one of those states under a Republican governor that made sure that our Medicaid patients also had access, and that was expanded. But home and health care wasn't there. And I think that was one of the bitterest pills for all of us to swallow. And it was the biggest omission. When we first started this process 18 months ago, and as I said before, it was called the Build Back Better plan. The home and community-based care was one of the pillars of that plan. And it really looked like it was going to make it. Senator Bob Casey, another giant in the Senate, was pushing it hard there. We had agreement. We had majority of people in both the House and Senate that believed we needed to do something about this. And we know that there are more than 1 million people that are on these long-term care wait lists. Here's what I believe. I think that every person has a right to be able to get care in their own home, in their own community, in the setting that they choose. And I didn't realize how broken the healthcare system was until John became sick a number of years ago. And I'm luckier than 99 9/10 of the people in this country. And there were days I just took my head and I banged it against the wall. The system is broken, it's fragmented, you can't figure out how to make it work. I would push numbers and dial numbers, and all you get would be recorded voices and no human being to help you. I finally broke down and called my congresswoman. Even getting me to get cut through the bureaucracy was almost impossible. And that was when I learned how broken the system was. And that began my odyssey on really trying to fix this system. And you suddenly learn that there's like this 90-day period. Don't be sick the 91st day, it's not going to be covered. And that everything is geared towards going into some kind of home or center, not being able to stay in your own home. So we've worked very hard on working so that people can retire with dignity and respect and stay in their own home and be able to do that. But I also learned when John was sick how hard it is to find caregivers and how many caregivers are not paid what they are worth. I had people I was blessed that I found a woman that has become part of our family and remains a part of our family. And I did pay a good day's wage, because if you want someone to take care of those you love, you need to do that. But too many people did not. And I needed to supplement as time went on, he needed people 24 hours. Finding people was hard. And people that were great were working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and were still living below the poverty line. They were in and out of different homes. When the pandemic started, they didn't have PPE equipment. They're the people that matter the most in our lives. All care is possible because of those people, and they're not treated in this community or this society for the worth that they have. So I just really learned then that we need a stronger system, and we need to pay care workers what their worth is, and we need to let people who have worked hard all their life be able to age in the setting that they want, and people with disabilities to be able to get the care that they want. Recently, this last month, my mother has been sick, was in intensive care for a week. Now this week she has COVID. I'm just reminded again, you have to have an advocate. You cannot leave somebody alone. You have to fight like hell just to make sure that they're being taken care of. And that's not right. We need to take care of our seniors. We need to take care of our most vulnerable. And that's what we are fighting for. So we need to, so what we want to work on now is that nearly 3 million women, mostly women of color, had to drop out of the workforce during the pandemic because of difficult choices they had to make. They had to caregive. They couldn't afford to be in the workforce. These are people that we need because, as I've said before, caregiving makes all other work possible. The annual income for these care workers continues to remain below the poverty line. And even though we didn't secure, I was on the phone with Arjun last week with a number of other leaders because we didn't get it in the bill we passed. What's next? And I know living in this system, again, bringing back a lot of nightmares, we cannot give up. We have to do something about this. And we're going to roll up our sleeves. Bob Casey's right there with me. All of the advocates are right out there with me. We have to keep our promise to seniors that they should be able to live with dignity and respect, and people with disabilities, and as well as the workers that care for them, we need to take care of them. So I want to do a number, we're looking at moving legislation, still having the key components of what we had last year. It would facilitate statewide planning to develop home care-based services in an infrastructure plan. It would enhance Medicaid funding for HCBS. It would incentivize workforce growth through innovative models that benefit direct care workers and care recipients, as well as to help workers organize. And it would support quality and accountability by funding programs through the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and conducting oversight of what's happening. And once and for all, we need to permanently authorize protection against impoverishment for individuals whose spouses received Medicaid home care and care and community-based services. Most people don't know that you have to be at a certain level or you're not even eligible for these services. So you have to sell your home. Your spouse has to get rid of all of any assets that they have. That's not right. It's not right. So we have to support families. We have to support people as they get older, and we have to support those with disabilities. So I think we're all here today to say we are here to keep going. We're not giving up. We're rolling up our sleeves. Our nation's long-term system right now doesn't meet the needs of too many people. We've got a responsibility to take care of our seniors, our workers, and to fight for better home and community-based services. And that's why we're here with you today. And that's why I'm going to keep working with my fellow soldiers in this fight now with renewed resolve that we will get this over the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Dingell. We are so fortunate to have you fighting for us. And we so appreciate you sharing your personal story because we know that you understand firsthand what's at stake for all of us. So thank you so, so much. And we know how hard you work to keep HCBS funding in the discussion, and we believe that we will win.
We will.
Now, I'd love for us to hear from Representative Padma Kupa, who is the co-chair of the Michigan Legislative Care Caucus and has been working so hard to address the direct care worker shortage that Congressman Dingell referred to in the state of Michigan. Welcome, Representative Kupa.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with all of you, with so many of the stakeholder groups that have been doing the work for years and that I have been working with as a legislator. And even before that, Ivan, you're one of my heroes. I have been seeing your name on emails as I've tracked this issue over the last decade or more. As an immigrant in particular, which is, I'm an immigrant from India. And as I started looking at how our houses of worship and our ethnic communities in the broader Asian American spectrum, many of us are used to, in the old country, joint families or aging parents living with their adult children and grandchildren, and sort of that spectrum of care, both child care and senior care, all being wrapped up into a family. And so we come here and we don't know what to do. So I'd been working on these issues prior to my time in the legislature. But then as I started getting involved with what was happening at the state level, because I helped with an organization called India Home in New York, came back to Michigan trying to implement some of the things and create a similar structure here in Michigan, I came to know about a policy that was passed in the Michigan legislature before I became a legislator. It was a bill that directed appropriations to study the long-term services and supports in the Michigan legislature. And lo and behold, it got published in the at the end of my first term, and it has a lot of the issues that we have been talking about as I had been working with Michigan's caring majority in my first term. In fact, I did a care town hall to elevate this issue in my district and prompted many of my Republican and Democratic legislators to do the same. And we recognize that a lot of the challenges that are faced in long-term care also apply to childcare. And it's fascinating because I had read a book in 2018, which has a very provocative title, How All Politics Became Reproductive Politics. And it really speaks to the caregiving aspect of how women have borne the brunt of being the caregivers, both of aging parents as well as young children. And I think that's one thing that I see right now. Debbie, Congresswoman Dingell, my mom also had a health issue, and my brother is now in India, and he has a first grader and a third grader that he missed their first day of school because he's trying to help over there, because I'm here and I can't work from home. And so I really am inspired by the stories that people share. The other day I talked to a constituent who's actually her mother had an incident, a health incident, and she broke her hip, and they could not find anyone to help her. And so the care agency said, you can bill the hours and we can pay you, but she's already got a full-time job. And so many people are doing double duty with their professional life and their family life, where they're caring for an adult or a child or someone vulnerable in their family. And so it's really important that we keep on hammering on this issue, because this is not a partisan issue. It is not a specific state. This is a national issue. And Michigan, when I started in the legislature, had 22,000 care workers shortage. Today, it's more than 35,000. Organizations like Caring Across Generations and many of the groups on the ground, like area agencies on aging. We're doing a lot of work, but we still need to do more to elevate the issue and acquaint other legislators so that we can all get behind these support services that we provide at the state level. There were recommendations from that long-term care infrastructure study that was commissioned in 2018. We need to have more people become aware of this, and that's why boots on the ground. I'm an organizer at heart, and that's why all of you who are here today listening to us, you need to double down your efforts and reach across the state, reach across the aisle, and make sure that your legislators know what the issue is. I'd also want to just highlight one other thing. As we started the Care Caucus this term with Representative Helena Scott and Representative Stephanie Young and others in the chamber, one of the things that came across as an issue was that driver's licenses are not always easily accessible. Only 16 states have been proactive and ensured that immigrants can get their driver's licenses. And we brought this up as an issue. And this term, we are hoping for these drive safe bills in Michigan that are championed by the Michigan Driving Forward Coalition, that these bills will get a hearing to allow care workers who are part of that immigrant population who can't get their driver's licenses to get their driver's licenses. So it's not just paying a fair wage is critical, but all the support services and things like getting a driver's license and ensuring that people can get to work are also important. We actually had a couple of an appropriations bill that was enacted that did give an additional $2.35 increase, but that's not enough. And we know that. And so One Fair Wage is doing the work that it's doing here in Michigan to push for my colleague, Representative Abraham Ayash, introduced a bill to bring up minimum wage to $15 an hour. There are so many things that we need to do in addition to the issues that you're working on as part of Caring Across Generations and the coalition of organizations. And I'm here to really, in a district that spans a wide range of diversity, both economic diversity and ethnic diversity. I think this is an issue that cuts across all of that we can find common ground. And I think that's really what I'm trying to do, is to make sure that people understand that this is not an issue that is only affecting a particular group of people, but all of us are impacted. If our aging population, our vulnerable population don't get the support services they need, all of us are failing.
Thank you so much, Rep. Kupa, for your leadership, for your words, for reminding us how universal and how powerful an issue this is. And I just want to say that the Michigan Care Caucus in the state legislature is a model nationally that state legislators are trying to replicate because of how innovative, how important, and how powerful a model it is. So thank you so much. And we're so fortunate today to have another member of the Care Caucus with us, Rep. Stephanie Young. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you all and so appreciate the work that you've all been doing. As a freshman legislator, I'll just have to say that I hadn't gotten in the weeds. I used to think that, wow, I'm not in the weeds on a bunch of these important issues, but that's only because you don't think about yourself when it relates to it sometimes. And having had a mom who we couldn't get care for, first learning about spend downs and like, what the heck? You got to spend every bit of your resources, everything you've ever had, not leave anything in terms of a legacy, just in order to get help. And then I realized, shoot, I've been on the front line of this for the past 25 years, but didn't really recognize it because that's what so many people are doing. People don't even associate themselves as being caregivers. They just associate themselves with just being a good family who loves their father or loves their mom or, loves whoever it is that they're taking care of and doesn't really understand that they are a part of this huge network of people who need help sometimes, who need help beyond what they're doing day to day. So I'm just excited to be here and to actually continue to learn. I've learned so much as being a member of the new Care Caucus. We talked about that $2.35 increase. And of course, we know that's just a scratch at the surface. But at the same time, we had to start somewhere. When we're looking at this historic budget that Michigan just passed, $76 billion budget, and still having $6 billion in American Rescue Plan Act funds still at the table, that gives me hope that we may be able to do something even more, even as relates to one-time support. We have the ability to do it with these additional dollars. And so that's why I show up. I show up to continue to learn, because that's what this job is. We get a chance to meet so many wonderful people and learn about the different issues, and then be able to dig in and figure out how we can help because of these types of relationships. So that's why I'm here. I just wanted to share that. And just to be, for those that are caregivers, workers, be encouraged. One thing that I always say when we look at the pandemic, and we know the horrors of the pandemic, right? And many times people will talk about the horrors, but I always like to highlight the good things. Before the pandemic, nobody talked about home health care workers and care workers as heroes. They didn't really talk about them being essential. And now this is the only way that we talk about them. And so this is the time to continue to push the envelope to get the additional supports and helps that we need. So with that, I just say thank you, and I turn it back over to you all. Bless you.
Thank you so much, Rep. Young. Those words will stay with me today for sure, and every day. Be encouraged. All of you caregivers, care workers, people who rely on these services, be encouraged. And you are going to feel encouraged when you hear from some of the advocates on the ground in the state of Michigan who are fighting for funding for home and community-based services. Let's turn it now to our policy discussion. And we are so fortunate to have with us here, Angela. I'm hoping that I can turn to you to share a little bit more about HCBS needs in the state of Michigan that are not yet being met. Angela, could you introduce yourself and speak to that, please?
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for this great discussion. My name is Angela Martin. I am the Senior Associate Director at the Michigan Developmental Disabilities Institute, and I'm also a family member of a person who receives home and community-based services. So I understand this on a real life, day-to-day experience, trying to support my sibling, and then also in supporting the disability community. Home and community-based services support Michiganders with disabilities to receive services in the most integrated setting. It also supports the inclusion of people in their community, and it also increases the individual's independence. Home and community-based services support people with disabilities to be productive and to contribute to their community. These services are essential to helping people go to work, go to school, and volunteer in their community. And our communities are richer when all of its members contribute and make our communities thrive. What we do need is we need investments in home and community-based services that are needed are not in institutional services. Delivering quality supports in the community is not just the right approach for people, for human beings. It also reduces the need for emergency services and hospitalizations. There's been mention of the pandemic and the highlight of people that provide care support as key to our community's needs. But we've also seen a lot of people experience a lot of challenges over this time, and they've been highly reliant on home and community-based services. While the access, it may have been there, the fulfillment has not been there because we don't have people that we can tap to deliver the services. So as many of our legislators have highlighted, the efforts at both the state and the federal level need to highlight opportunities to improve wages, expand support so that people are reaching farther and being a greater member of their community. So I hope that both at the state and federal level and the opportunities of this coalition, we can collectively work together to really push forward with home and community-based services.
We absolutely will. Thank you for that perspective, Angela, especially for giving voice to the disability perspective here. There's so much overlap between our needs and experiences, and also unique experiences that must be a part of the conversation. And I really want to bring Nicole Shannon in to talk more about the aging population in Michigan. Could you introduce yourself and share more about how HCBS funding addresses the needs of older adults in the state of Michigan?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. This is such a great group. My name's Nicole Shannon. I am the systemic advocacy attorney with the Michigan Elder Justice Initiative. I do direct representation and systemic and policy work in support of disability civil rights with a focus on the aging population. And when it comes to home and community-based services, I really have two main points that I want to bring up from my perspective. One is, without home and community-based services, folks wind up in nursing homes, and we know that studies show people want to age in place. Aging in place with home and community-based services is typically cheaper than nursing home care, and it results in better health outcomes. And so with that in mind, we know that it's something that, everybody wants to strive for. It's a matter of getting there. The next thing I want to bring up is the impact that a lack of home and community-based services has on adult guardianship. I think a lot of us have been more aware than ever of adult guardianship, thanks to news reports about Britney Spears and the Netflix film I Care a Lot. And so when folks want to age in place and they don't have home and community-based services, I think we've all seen the extreme lengths that folks will go to remain at home. And this often means going without care, relying on unpaid loved ones. As Representative Young just pointed out, it's just about, folks filling in just to be good family members. And then also, paying with money that they really can't afford, as folks have pointed out too, that you really do have to impoverish yourself to even become eligible for a lot of these. And so when folks are faced with those really challenging situations and they end up going without, they often wind up in dangerous situations. And because of a combination of the danger and their age, their capacity is called into question. Sometimes by folks who mean very well and they're concerned about the danger, but they're going, if somebody's in this situation, they might not have the capacity to make decisions. Maybe this person, they're older, they have a disability, maybe they're not thinking this through and they need a guardianship. We know this isn't a capacity issue. This is a home and community-based services issue, often colliding with a poverty issue, and it's all kind of masquerading as incapacity. And so this is just one more issue. When we don't have those home and community-based services in place, we end up with these unnecessary guardianships or folks who are just subject to the system because the pantry is empty, or they had a fall because they didn't have the assistance that they need, or maybe their home is in a dangerous situation. And so that's kind of my perspective from the legal perspective and the aging perspective. But I want to cut myself off there because I'm so, excited to hear from folks, particularly folks who are direct care workers themselves, about what their perspective is along the way.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Such a helpful overview and a good reminder. One point that you made about good access to HCBS being the best prevention and enabling really good healthcare outcomes is really, really important. I want to turn next to Sherry Boyd from the ARC Michigan to talk a little bit about why long-term funding for HCBS from the federal government is so necessary to address some of the problems we are seeing in the care system in Michigan. Sherry?
Thank you. I'm Sherry Boyd from the ARC Michigan, and I'm the executive director there. Obviously, everyone's hearing stories day after day in the news and around the state of Michigan about families and people with disabilities who are sitting in ER departments because there's not direct care workers available to help support them in their own home or in their family's home. And so from our perspective, the head support dollars are really important because we just don't have enough of federal dollars in Michigan. You know, the Direct Care Wage Coalition, which there's a number of us that are in it, but it really has always focused on wages. And so we had some success. Rep. Koopa alluded to it, the $2.35 increase that we got this past year. But there's nothing new in the 23 budget. So we'll be working on a supplemental with the state legislators and the department and the governor to try to get some of the ARPA dollars that Rep. Koopa mentioned, to try to get people at least a bonus or something in a supplemental budget bill. It's really, really important. We hear more and more that folks are waiting for services and they can't get them because they are not marketable wages anymore. I mean, you can't pay $14 or $15 an hour to people to take care of folks or support them in their own home because there's lots of other jobs that are higher paying. So our focus will be this year to try to get money in the supplemental budget that we hope will get going soon, based on the fact there's Rep. Koopa said 6 billion, we've heard 7 billion, there's just money sitting there. I think long term, you know, we need to continue to work with the legislative body and the department to come up with the long-term sustainable plan to get wages up. I mean, there's just no other way around it. And, you know, from the Direct Care Wage Coalition perspective, that's like the priority. There's other work that's going on around training and curriculum and a pathway to a career, but without getting wages up, we'll continue to lose people to other industries, in my opinion. And, you know, Michigan has a statute in its constitution that talks about serving those with the most vulnerable needs, and, you know, we have a duty to do that. I think the other thing we always need to keep in mind is that people with disabilities, as someone alluded to earlier with the aging population, they will end up in nursing homes too, because they don't have supports to stay in their home. And, you know, in terms of quality of life for a 30-year-old person with a disability to go into a nursing home, that's not a good outcome for them. So thank you. I'm really excited about this opportunity to talk about this issue that's really, in my mind, the most important kind of thing we can be working on right now.
Thank you so much, Sherry, for those thoughts, and I couldn't agree more. And there's also this question of institutionalizing, forcing people into institutions also has a huge negative impact on the entire community. We actually are interdependent, and we should all be able to live in the community together and have the freedom to choose to do that. And this care infrastructure is the essential enabling force for us to be able to do that. And without any further ado, we are very fortunate to have with us Christina Potts, who is a direct care worker, and we're really excited to hear from her about her perspective on what is needed to address the issues that direct care workers are facing. Christina, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Christina Potts. I'm a direct care worker for over 30 years. And not many can say that they worked in our industry that long. I received my training in the field as far as changing briefs, Hoyer lifts, insulin care, blood sugar testing, and catheter care. For both the workers and our clients' safety, these are things we should have access to training on. The current state of the direct care worker is low wages and no time off. It is hard work for not enough pay and no benefits. I would like to see a living wage, $18 an hour, and benefits including paid time off and healthcare benefits and training. This would allow me to have a better quality of life and have more time with my family. If these steps are taken, the direct care workforce will be strong and long-term, so we can serve better to our clients. Thank you very much, and I I thank this panelists, and like someone said before, if it wasn't for this pandemic, our voices are being heard. And I thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. The work that you do as a direct care worker is the work that makes everything else possible. And, people ask, is this skilled work? Well, I think Christina and so many others who do this work every day, and all of us who rely on it, know it absolutely is skilled work. This is a workforce of professionals that is enabling millions of people to go to work every day. And what you do, producing human dignity, producing quality of life, producing the ability to live well in the community, a whole full life in the community. I can't imagine what would be more valuable, what is more valuable to our communities, to our economy, to the state of Michigan. So thank you for the work that you do. And I think you have felt today what a force there is, what a powerful coalition there is behind you in making these jobs good jobs. And with that, I want to welcome Congresswoman Dingell back to just share any closing thoughts after you've heard from our panelists today, what you see as some of the next steps, or anything you want to add to build on what's been shared.
Well, I thank our panelists who have done an outstanding job of laying out what the issues are and what is at stake. And that's why we have to do the work at both the federal and the state level. We're not going to give up. We're still going to try to get things in. There is legislation that has to still pass at the end of the year. So we're going to work to get programs that we care deeply about extended for at least another year. Like money files the person and the spousal poverty, but we keep getting them. We get them extended for a year. And while we continue to try to get this home and community-based care actually passed as a permanent program and actually do something about care givers, we will take some steps now, yet even for the end of this year. But I think all of us are totally committed to starting again at the beginning of the next Congress. And I don't want to make today political, but I am going to be political in the sense that elections have consequences. And I would urge everybody participating here to talk to everybody that you know, that they need to talk to those that are going to be in public office making public policy about the importance of taking care of caregiving, period. I mean, it's not only caregiving for our seniors and for those with disability, but for our children. It needs to become a priority in this country. Every other industrialized nation in the world does make it a priority. And it's time for us to do that. So as we move into discussion, that would be my message and my request to all of you, is that we need to make this a critical issue in the public policy arena and to be talked about in every community, and to say to people, this needs to be a priority. It is what makes all other work possible. And all those small businesses and all those large businesses that are looking for people to work and all these openings they have, why do they have them? Because there are too many people that are worried about taking care of those that they love, and they cannot find caregivers to do it, and we don't pay caregivers enough. That would be my closing message before I move into discussion.
Powerful. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. It is up to us. You heard the Congresswoman. It is up to us to build this movement, build our power, take the action, do the work that will get us across the finish line on making these jobs good jobs, and making sure that we can all have access to the services that we need to live well. And with that, I want to open it up to questions from the audience. Thank you all so much for joining us. We cannot wait to hear what questions you have for the panelists. We have some real expertise here. So take advantage of it. What your questions are, I'm sure, can be addressed here with our panelists. Let's see, do we have any questions, Callie? I am seeing lots of gratitude for our speakers, for the leadership of Congresswoman Dingell and our members of the CARE Caucus in the state legislature. Thank you. Thank you. Callie, do we have any questions?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a question from Madeline Krisoff, who's asking, would it be effective to link the support for direct care workers of elders with that of those of children?
I tend to want, I mean, we talked about this last week, actually. I think we need to talk about caregiving. You know, if you cannot go to work and do a great job if you are worried about those that you love. And those that we love are young, and those that we love are older. So I think the fight for paying caregivers what they're worth is something that is tied together. I think that they're different issues. I think that paying caregivers a decent wage, paying them benefits, that they shouldn't be living below the poverty line, that this is one of the most important jobs we have in this country and we need to treat it like that, is absolutely critical. Then you get into, you know, when you talk about caregiving for children, there are different issues. You want to make sure you've got the right child to caregiver ratio. If you're in a daycare center, in a residential, there are different issues for safety and health. But yes, the core issues are the same. You can't do a good day's job if you're worried about somebody you love not being taken care of.
That's right. And there's this whole phenomenon of the sandwich generation caregiver. And we at Caring Across Generations say that the sandwich is too gentle a metaphor because the pressure, we call it the panini effect, the pressure on caregivers who are struggling to manage care for aging loved ones with disabilities, and young children is so intense on every level. And there are growing numbers of people in that position. And the reality is that the users of all of these caregiving programs, childcare, paid leave, and home and community-based services, it's one intergenerational family. And what we need is to make sure that at every stage of life and at every ability, that we have the supports we need to care for the people we love and work and live whole lives. And that is what a strong care infrastructure looks like, and it absolutely includes childcare. And it looks like we have another question from David.
Thank you. And it's an honor to be a part of the session today. And I'm Dave Lalamia, Director of the Area Agencies on Aging Association of Michigan, and we would like to add our thanks to Congresswoman Dingell and Representatives Koopa and Young for their incredible advocacy. You know, Congresswoman Dingell said that older adults and people with disabilities need an advocate, and that's also true for this group that is trying to do public policy work and appropriations seeking. And so, you know, your work, Congresswoman and representatives, are really important advocacy roles as we look for policy changes and additional funding to support care. The home and community-based services are really at the essence of what area agencies on aging do, and those challenges have been complicated by the aging of the population, by the pandemic, by the shortage of direct care workers. So working together to find solutions to these issues are really incredibly important as we move forward. I'm also really encouraged to hear that all the talk about support for the direct care workforce and for family and informal caregivers. And we find at the area agency on aging level that all three of those areas are related. So, whether our advocacy is aimed at Medicare or Medicaid, the Older Americans Act, which has titles that address home and community-based services and caregiver services. We have a state appropriation, the Older Michiganians Act. There are so many ways that we can work together to try and improve. And again, we would like to just add our thanks to all of you, and to, in particular, Congresswoman Dingell and Representatives Koopa and Young. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave, for chiming in. It's great to hear from you and to have your partnership in this. We have a question from Pam about whether the COVID pay, the $2.35 increase is in the budget into 2023.
This is Sherry, it is.
Oh, great. And we're seeing a nod from Rep. Young. Wonderful, great. Let's see. We also have a question. What is the likelihood that benefits like paid leave and healthcare will become a reality for our direct support professionals? Rep. Young, would you like to address that?
It's a reality like every other group that didn't have paid leave and paid benefits. We fight for it and we work for it and we don't stop. So I'm just like, don't give up. And that's what we're here to do, to continue to spread that message that it's needed. And if there's a way, when we're dealing with individual corporations and businesses that have their own policies, when there's an opportunity for us to legislate something like that, of course we will, but the key is to not give up. It's been done before. When they've said it couldn't be done, it's been done before. And that's the thing that I like to again highlight about the pandemic. I'm from Detroit, and in the city of Detroit, they would tell us all the time that you have to pay your water bill to get water. Just every single time. But it's amazing when a pandemic hit, and the one way to fight the pandemic was to have clean running water in your house. Guess what? Everybody's water got turned back on. So don't tell me what can't be done. Anything can be done if we have the will to make it happen. So when they ask the question, what's the likelihood? The likelihood is it can absolutely happen. We have to fight for it. It's not just gonna fall in our laps.
Thank you so much, Rep. Young. We have a question, Congresswoman Dingell, about the HCBS Access Act. Could you talk a little bit more about that piece of federal legislation?
Well, the home and the HCB, I can't even talk today, would allow people to stay in their own homes instead of having to go into I hate to use the word institutional setting, and that's what it is, but you would be covered. Right now, there are almost 1 million people on the waiting list to be able to stay in their own home. Medicaid right now is the largest payer of long-term care in this country, and people want to stay in their own home, but they can't afford to. And we're trying to change the program so that they can be able to do that, and that's what we're trying to do in this bill. And we're also trying to make sure that we're paying the caregivers enough money that are taking care of them. So we're not going to give up. I absolutely believe, someone is much happier when they can stay in their own home, when they can stay in their community where they're known and loved. It's home. They're not in a long-term care setting. I mean, to be perfectly frank, I had to put my mother, put is not the right word. After my mother came out of intensive care, we all know after you're older, if you're in the hospital for a week, you're going to need rehab. And she's been in rehab and she got COVID. And, she got COVID because she was in that setting. And we know that those have been settings that COVID spreads more easily. And I'm on the phone every day, probably being to those that are there a total bitch, but I don't, excuse my language, but everybody needs to have the advocate. And I want her to be able to go home and to live independently. And fortunately, she can afford it. So for me, it's just navigating the system right now. But too many people can't afford that. And even, by the way, when you can't afford it, navigating the system is a nightmare, a total nightmare. it's like not navigable. And that's what we're trying to make it fix. Everybody should be able to retire and live as they grow older with dignity and respect and live life to its fullest. And that's what we're working to try to achieve.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Dingell. We have a question from Brooke that talks about HCBS tenants are utilized in adult foster care homes, but it has been challenging to fully implement full integration when the licensing regulations have not evolved and everyone's right to risk rather than the restraint. Okay, so this is a very specific policy question, and it looks like it is about bringing the licensing and regulatory affairs in tandem with HCBS philosophies. I don't know if anyone on the panel feels like they can address that question. Okay, Nicole.
I can
great.
speak to it just briefly and say, you know, it's adult foster care in Michigan is a little bit unusual because we do have licensed adult foster care settings. We also have unlicensed adult foster care settings, and the difference is typically related to how the services are provided, whether it's directly through that licensed home or whether it's essentially room and board, and the care is provided elsewhere. I can tell you that, you know, the philosophies related to how HCBS works in the community in different types of settings, including adult foster care homes, is something that we're looking at closely at the Michigan Elder Justice Initiative, because it really is about just meeting folks in whatever setting they want to be in. But we recognize that, you know, adult foster care is not always as integrated a setting as maybe, you know, the individual would choose. So, and when it comes to licensing, I guess I'll just leave it at, you know, adult foster care homes have a very unusual licensing regime in Michigan. And I would be happy to talk to folks offline about that.
Thank you, Nicole. And Nicole Jorwick from Caring Across Generations, did you want to also weigh in on this question?
Sure. Really quickly, I just wanted to say that I think actually the bill that Representative Dingell was just talking about, the HCBS Access Act, would actually go a long way in looking at the regulatory components too. Part of what's so confusing is that whether you're talking about adult foster homes or somebody getting a job coach or somebody getting residential supports through home and community-based services or HCBS, there's a lot of different waivers. They all have different entry points. The great way that HAA or the HCBS Access Act would create one system, and it would be, and as Representative Dingell said, one system with no waiting. And so all of these really technical, wonky things that cause hindrances and harm in folks' lives would be addressed because of that one system, and also the fact that we also have well-paid workers supporting the system. So just wanted to kind of tie those pieces together if helpful.
Thank you so much, Nicole.
I have a quick question. What is our next step?
Okay, great question. Would love to hear anybody who wants to take this question about what is our next step to go ahead and chime in here.
We don't give up. I called IGen last week and said, okay, we got to roll up our sleeves on what's next. You know, I say to people, some of you may know this, some of you may not. My father-in-law was one of the authors of Social Security. And after it passed, he introduced the first universal health care bill in the early 40s. And we got Medicare in 1965 as a result of that work that took 25 years. We're going to get this done. And we've closer than we've ever been. Every other industrialized nation in the world has it. So we just keep making the fight. First of all, we've got to have a House and a Senate that understands the importance of it. So these elections do matter. And you need to be talking about these elections and getting people on the record and putting the human face on why it matters. And we right now are working on laying the groundwork for what we're going to introduce next year, having these kinds of roundtables, raising these issues, doing as much as we can so that people really know the importance of the issue matters. You know, you think you understand the issue until you have to live it. And when you've lived it, you understand how screwed up the system is. And we have to put the human face on it and help people understand how broken the system is. I think the pandemic did that to some extent, and we have to take this moment and keep pushing for the win. And I think we can do it.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next question is from Paul, and it is about whether it is cheaper for the state of Michigan to go with HCBS instead of placing people in nursing homes.
I wanted to, and I think Paul knows, yes, absolutely it is. On the whole, not for everybody, not in every situation, not every single time, but in general, the answer is yes. And there are barriers and reasons related to the way that we fund things that kind of push people or pull people in the direction of nursing homes as opposed to HCBS. But in general and often, and you can certainly find examples where it's not the case. So all of those lawyer caveats in there, but in general, the answer is yes.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Our next question is from Michael, and it is for Rep. Young. The American Rescue Plan Act provided Michigan with over $270 million to expand home and community-based services. Is the CARE Caucus engaged in planning for the use of this time-limited funding? And if so, can you share any of the planning?
Right, there I am. Yes, so that is top of mind for us. However, we haven't met for a few months now, and that's unfortunate. And so we're probably going to end up calling a meeting regardless of whether session is in or not. It's been a really interesting summer and going into the fall. We only have 2 session days planned for September. And that's usually when we would meet, when we would have everybody present. But I'm certain when we talk to the co-chairs, we'll go ahead and because we need to keep working. We can't wait just to show up, right? So we're going to keep working, and I'll be certain that this remains a priority for us because there's no way we can afford to send 1 cent back of money that's sitting at the table.
Thank you so much, Rep. Young. That's great. We have a question from Denise, which is about having written to local university and colleges in her county. She's requested a student pool for a vast amount of care providers and wondering if there's been any conversation on legislation or communication with Michigan college students about direct care and supporting people to be paid to provide care or even having internships in this field.
I'll chime in there because that's part of the conversation around that certification. And I know Rep. Koopa, one of the things she's always talking about is professionalizing this industry and with certification so that when we take it to the college and the university levels, people understand, look here, this isn't something that is now just for, a person who didn't know what they want to do with their life when they were in high school and said, well, this is the only thing I think I'm able to do. It is something, it's a career that we need people who care about people. I liken it to education. I need folks who care about molding young minds and wanting to help develop productive citizens. And we really need to tap into people who care about people when it comes to this profession. And having certifications and professionalizing this profession, I think will help us, particularly when we start to work with our colleges and our universities. So at present, I'm not aware of any legislation that we have around that, but we're always open to ideas. I'll end with this. When I first got to Lansing, I was talking to a colleague who had been there, And I was just kicking around different ideas. I was like, I was writing about a bill like this and a bill like that. And she simply looked at me and said, now, don't forget, Representative, you are a lawmaker. And if there's something that you feel like needs to be legislated, let's do it. And I went, oh, okay, let's go. So I say that to say, let's work together on perhaps drafting some legislation around that.
Wonderful. That's right. You are the one we've been waiting for. Great. So from Casey, we've talked a lot about current barriers in HCBS and various solutions, but she would like to know, what are the roadblocks to these solutions? And what are some of the roadmaps to overcoming them? And this is for maybe Angela, would you like to speak to this one? What are some of the roadblocks to the solutions that we have identified?
So some of the things that we've identified, I think the fact that we have legislators here, both from the federal and state level, is really key, because too often we have this challenge when, and some people have touched on it, that we have programmatic rules that get legislated or implemented from the federal level, but then operationalize at our state level, and we might need some additional changes to happen on the state level so that they're really reflecting what is happening in Michigan. I think that's something we often see. Somebody mentioned the challenges regarding licensing. So, you know, while we have home and community-based services, sometimes we have we create new challenges when we bring that federal money back to the state. So it's about working both ends and working back and forth so that we're seeking programs that really reflect the individual needs of that are on the ground, but then also addressing challenges and bringing those to our federal legislators so that we're improving. I mean, money follows the person, and the Congresswoman's been so passionate about it, is making sure that whole idea that people could have to have those resources leave with them to the nursing home to go back to their community is very practical. And those type of solutions need to be reflected both at the state and federal level. But some of the roadblocks we need to do is also, and thankfully, and the Congresswoman mentioned this earlier, is that Michigan did take Medicaid expansion. I think the real important thing is that when federal opportunities come to states like Michigan and others take those opportunities up. And we need legislators from all perspectives to see that there is advantages in having good healthcare, so that it helps citizens really live as part of our community. So avoiding those roadblocks and not creating them by missing opportunities when they're presented to us.
Great. Thank you, Angela. And Kathy from the ARC has a kind of related point here, which is that, you know, we have, as advocates, we've been collecting stories, and we have lots of connections to people who would be able to testify to the importance of HCBS services and DSP services and pay. And, you know, we're just wondering, for the Congresswoman and for our state reps, what can we do to support you? We're doing our best, and we're here, and we know you know we're here, but we'd really like to give you everything you need to continue to take this fight forward. And if there's anything in particular that you want to name for us, we are ready to hear it.
I'll let Rep. Young go first.
Okay, and as I was thinking, I was going to let you go first. No problem. So this is what I would share. One of our challenges, particularly when we have good legislation that comes forward, if we can ever get it to committee, that's one of the biggest things. You know, this is an issue that's not partisan. I don't even feel like you know, fighting for $15 an hour. When you do the math, you're still in poverty, but we still have to fight for it, right? And so when those types of issues make it to committee, having people, if you're local, show up and give testimony in committee. When people ask us what you can do, that's one of the first places that I start. It's wonderful when we reach out to our legislators, and as long as our staff get us the information, because I'm new, I say everything that I've learned. I tell the truth. I just tell it like it is. But when I can get somebody to show up and support us in committee, those things are huge. But at the same time, we have to build that working relationship so that you all know. There was a question that I read. They were like, well, what bills should we be supporting right now? And I quickly looked up Representative Ayesha's bill number so that you would know. But we got to form that two-way relationship where we're able to feed you information, feed you the bills, feed you the legislation, so you can help us get it to committee and then show up and give your testimonies and share those things. When we make things personal, because we're people, we're all people. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, we're still people. But when you're able to tap into a folks' humanity, that does change things. And so I would just say that as just one way to be helpful for us.
Thank you, Rep. Young. What would you add, Congresswoman?
You need to demand action. You need to tell your elected officials, no matter what party they are, that you need help, that you're struggling. I mean, every person, this shouldn't be a partisan issue. We all have people that we love. We're all living in a sandwich generation, and we need to help put the human face on it, but hold meetings, hold roundtables, invite them to come in, get people that agree with you, that, you know, when you talk about pulling caregiving together, there are a lot of, go work with your local businesses who can't find people to work for them because women can't afford to go back into the workplace because they don't have anybody to do the caregiving. Put together that coalition, bring attention to it, demand action. That's what I've done all my life before I ever got to Congress. When I saw a problem, I put together a coalition of people to go out and raise attention and make our voices heard, and truthfully be a royal pain in the ass until we got the action that we needed. And that's what we need to do right now.
Real talk. That is right. And we have a question about how people can get connected to the Care Caucus.
I was just typing that. I was typing that response. So to get connected, you can reach out to any of us, Representative Scott's office, Representative Padma Cooper's office, myself. You know, you can Google us. We're on the state legislative pages. That's how you find us, and we can connect you with our meetings. They're open to everyone. I know I saw Kelly Garrett on here, the mayor of Lathrop Village. She's one of our members. And so, yeah, that's the easiest way. And then we'll be able to add you to our list when we're having our meetings and different events that we'll have. So that's that.
Wonderful. And with that, I'd love to, Rep. Young, if you have any closing remarks, I'd love to invite you to offer them, and then we'll go to Congresswoman Dingell.
Oh, yeah. Again, thank you so much. Thank you for the information. I've learned so much. I'm, doing personal messages to people. How do I learn more about this? Where can I get that? And that's what this is all about. And so I said it earlier, I'll say it again. I'm here till we get the results that we need. The good Congresswoman has already said, we fight till we get it done, and we don't stop fighting, and we keep pressing folks. Because I believe that humans know how to communicate with humans, and that's what we all are. And somewhere along the lines, politics seems to get people confused. I'm just like, okay, we're still human beings first and foremost, if nothing else. So let's just deal with each other like that. So that's how I come about this thing. I'm really good at working with folks across the aisle. I get things done. As a freshman, I already have a bill that's been signed into law. You don't get that when you're in a minority. You get that because you know how to work with people. And so I'm going to be working with people on this issue. You all have a fierce ally in Rep. Young, and I'm glad to know that I'll be able to come back too to continue the good fight. So thank you so much for those final words.
Thank you so much, Rep. Young. We appreciate you, and we're with you all the way. Congresswoman Dingell, any closing words for us?
I mean, I think we've said it, which is we know that there's an urgent need for long-term care and caregiving in this country. We need to make our voices heard. Everybody on this call already knows it. We need to expand the circle of people. The pandemic shined a light on how broken and fractured our healthcare system is. how it discriminates against people that need that helping hand, that should be able to live a life with dignity and respect and still get the care that they need. And it's our job to go out and build that large coalition that's going to demand action and demand change. So this is part of that advocacy. And I'm not going to, sometimes I'll end with, we've only just begun, but I haven't just begun. I think we're getting close to the finish line, and I'm ready to get this over the finish line.
Wonderful and perfect. It is so true that, oftentimes you'll have these conversations and you'll say, we're going to do this, we can do this. And it is true that we have transformed the conversation about home and community-based services, about the care economy, out of this crisis that we've all dealt with. We are all caregivers, we are all care recipients, and we all know that now. And we should all know how powerful we are. This is an inflection point. There is no stopping now. We've come so far. For so long, this was an issue that no one talked about, no one cared about. And here we are. We are so poised to win. So that's what we're going to do in Michigan and all over this country. Thank you all so much for being a part of this movement, for joining this conversation today. Thank you to our champions who are leading the way for us, and let's keep going until we win. Thank you all so much.